And as we have said on this program many times, for much of America, the economy is doing very well. There are now exactly 5 million new jobs added to the economy since just before the pandemic and lockdowns hit. And if you are an asset owner, the economy is really good. Home prices are up, stocks at record highs, including the huge post-pandemic pop. But here at CNBC, we are intellectually honest enough to ask, does the stock market even matter to voters? Joining us now is former Chief of Staff to Vice President Michael Pence and CNBC contributor Mark Short, and former top aide to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, Melissa DeRosa. Thank you for both. I mean, Indiana, New York, are you allowed to be in New Jersey, first off? We're glad to welcome you here for another bipartisan civil conversation. Melissa, does the stock market matter?
I mean, look, 61% of Americans have an investment in the stock market. So certainly the stock market matters. However, unless there's something massive that happens in the stock market, a major drop, it's not something that is top of mind to voters day to day. So while it's a great talking point, while it certainly undercuts what Trump was saying would happen to the stock market should Biden be elected.
Yeah, he said it would crash. We're at a record high now.
He certainly did. It doesn't matter as much as things like inflation, gas prices, interest rates. And so those are the things I think that are still driving much more of the election. And consumer confidence, while up, is lagging. We'll
get to inflation in a second. We've got a whole thing planned for that. Don't jump the script. But, Mark, I will say this. President Biden's he's got to be a little careful with the stock market rhetoric, I think. On one hand, he's going to want to brag and say the stock market's at record highs, and my predecessor said it would crash, and now here we are at record highs. I get it. But you also don't want to exacerbate the wealth inequality that will come from asset prices going up while half the country, or 39%, doesn't own stocks.
I think he's actually been pretty cautious, to be fair. I do think that the last 3 months have obviously been really good for the market as interest rates have capped and believe it's going to be coming down. Conversely, the paradox of the market going up, though, is that likely you have more and more job layoffs as the economy cools. And so that's going to be kind of the conundrum he faces as he tries.
Yeah, but the government's adding a lot of jobs. 5 million jobs added since the pandemic, and a lot of those are the government's state and federal.
Unfortunately, the government never stops growing. It just keeps going.
There's 26 million government employees now in the United States.
Too many.
Well,
no, well, I was just...
As a former government employee, Melissa.
I was too.
Oh, that's right, you too.
No, I was going to say, I think the Fed has done an incredible job at sort of reining in inflation while not causing major layoffs. And I think if they're able to continue that dance artfully going into 2024 and you see stability and you see the consumer confidence continuing to grow, it's only good for Biden. But unlike Trump, Biden has not been out bragging and overstating where the stock market currently is. I think he's trying to keep expectations level, and I think he's doing it responsibly going into the year.
I think that for most voters, you continue to see that the economy is a lagging number for Joe Biden. But I do think that I'm probably, unlike a lot of Republicans, I think it could benefit him over the course of the next 10 months because for the first time in 3 years, real wages are actually outpacing inflation and interest rate hikes, obviously. So real wages are up for the first time in 3 years. And I don't think that that's really sunk in yet for a lot of the voters and how it's
that segues very nicely to my next thing. And I want to quantify this. I'm doing this because I like the restaurant, not because I'm picking on the restaurant. We picked it because I know it and I know the prices of the last few years. Okay, so listen to this both. So we're talking about inflation at a high level, but let's get granular, okay? So we wanted to look into one of my go-to spots when I'm in the Midwest visiting family or friends in lovely Madison, Wisconsin, or Milwaukee. This is where they're based. And it's called Kopp's. And they got a couple locations, a burger and custard place. I go there a couple times a year. Great people. They're dealing with higher costs like everybody else. So we used the Wayback Machine and looked at prices on the menu at Kopp's from 2021 to now. Burgers, French fries, chicken sandwiches, they've gone up 20, 25, or even 30%. Kopp's obviously not alone. Not picking on them. Love you guys. And yes, while the rate of inflation has come down, Melissa, there are no signs that actual prices are going to come down. A meal for four at Kopp's maybe used to cost you $40. Now it costs you $50. And that's, by the way, everywhere in the United States. I think that's the inflation battle Biden has to win. No, it's the pocketbook stuff.
No, you're 100% correct. And, since the pandemic, across the board, average inflation is up 19%, and people feel that. Now, There's a theory that as time goes on, we're becoming more acclimated to it, so you don't feel the same sticker shock. To your point, real wages are starting to increase and are beginning to outpace inflation. And so the question is, what happens in the next 9 critical months? Are those trends able to continue? And even if you don't see the price of the hamburger go down, do you feel it less because, number one, you're more used to the price change, and number two, your real wages are beginning to increase?
And I don't, honestly, I don't think there's anything, Mark, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that President Biden or Trump or whomever could do about that. We locked people out. It was hard to get employees back. Most of those cost increases are probably just increased wages. And we're not going to see wages get cut because you still have a hard time finding employees. Well, I don't know what anybody could do about that.
I'd probably take a little bit of issue because, yes, I certainly wouldn't have supported all the lockdowns as they happened.
That's a whole different segment.
Even after that, I do think that Joe Biden pushed way too much fiscal stimulus into the system that generated much of the inflation that we incurred. So I do think he owns the inflation that we experienced. Having said that, again, to Melissa's point, you've seen interest rates come down, markets are going up, real wages are going up. I think that narrative could turn over the course of the next 10 months into election day.